You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron, and a happy Monday to you all. The Hall of Fame game is behind us. Week 1 of the preseason is fast approaching with games kicking off this coming, Friday? Thursday? I think it's Friday's the first games. That being said, between now and then, we got some downtime. We've got some news going around, but the big thing that everybody's talking about at the current moment is, of course, the Micah Parsons situation in wanting out of Dallas. Now, the conversation surrounding this whole thing is highly speculative. A lot of people saying that it's all about Jerry Jones and just loving the media circus and basically gathering as many headlines as possible through an offseason to make sure that the Dallas Cowboys are always relevant, whether it's in season or out of season. Whatever it may be, we're in the downtime. And I'm here to speculate, and I'm here to talk with you all today. So, as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you all. Your thoughts, your opinions on Micah Parsons and the potential of him getting traded. Now, I'll come out and say right away, I don't really think that this is going to happen. The reality is, I'm going to assume that Micah Parsons at some point is going to be signed and extended by the Dallas Cowboys. That being said, I was laying in bed, sitting there thinking about possible places that he could wind up being traded to and what teams he could potentially help, and it got me to thinking, why don't we sit down and just kind of talk and speculate? So I want to hear from you all, your thoughts. What are the best fits for Micah Parsons, not named, of course, the Dallas Cowboys? I have 4 teams we're going to dive into here. I have a pretty solid case, I would argue, for each and every single one. The first 2 are the more logical ones, in my opinion. The other 2, it's getting a little bit more fancy and a little more fun, a little bit more speculative and more outside the realm of possibility, but with enough zigging and zagging, you could actually get to the end point of a potential trade making sense if all the cards fell the right way. So we'll start with the first one that I have here, and that is, of course, going to be none other than the New England Patriots, a team who by far have the most money in the league unspent as things currently stand right now, and the way I see it, could use any bit of help that they could get. This roster in its current state is one of the most, in my eyes, imperfect in the NFL. I wouldn't say the most, but they are definitely amongst the tops. And working in the New England sports media realm, there's a lot of crazy opinions about how many games could actually be won by this team. And while I do think this team could be better than last season's, the fact that I have people hammering the table for 10 plus wins around me is just, it's rather insane, I will say. When you look at New England last season, and yes, there has been a lot of work done to this defense, finishing last in sacks with just 28 and had the 4th lowest overall pressure rate in the league. Adding guys like Milton Williams, Harold Landry, Carlton Davis should all bolster that defense and should help things out on all different fronts of the entire defensive side of the football. That all being said, though, there is a reason for concern with this team and with its makeup, and that is because they currently stand as the team with the least amount of money spent right now as it currently stands, sitting on roughly $60 million in cap space right now. This team is primed for a big, splashy move. And the fact that Stephon Diggs headlines I guess Milton Williams too, but Stephon Diggs and a Milton Williams who, don't get me wrong, I'm excited to see how he pans out. I'm looking forward to seeing him get his opportunity in a full-fledged starting role as a leader on a defense. He's coming from a defense that was littered with talent surrounding him and has a lot to prove. And while Stephon Diggs is probably the biggest name that was brought in this offseason, it's left some to be desired. Now, you look at the way this team is structured right now and how things could unfold going over the next few years. Drake May, as it currently stands, going into the 2nd year of his rookie deal, with his 5th year option being in the 2028 season should the New England Patriots opt to add that to his current rookie contract on the 4 years it's currently standing on. There is plenty of opportunity and plenty of space between now and when that eventual Drake May contract extension has to hit. And I think the big one you're kind of looking at right now currently is probably Christian Gonzalez with his deal coming up sooner rather than later. But I'm, again, another guy you're probably going to hit for that 5th year option. But that being said, you've got between now, 2025, and 2029, essentially, before an extension kicks in. That's a 4-year window, which, coincidentally enough, 3 to 4 year deal, monster deal for a guy like a Micah Parsons could eat up in the interim during that time frame. And on top of that, you look at the cap space in the NFL and the way it has jumped up year over year over year over year. Barring the COVID season and what happened that year, the number has ballooned, and it has gotten so large that giving Micah Parsons a deal now where you're giving him $40-some-odd million a year, because that's what the top-end edge rushers are going for at this current point in the NFL, it's a no-brainer. The fact that you could pay him, let's just say hypothetically, $42 million per year as the best edge defender in the NFL right now, and still have anywhere from 20 to 18 million or so in cap space available to you as the cap will continue to rise going through the years, you should have no issue bringing in a guy like Micah Parsons. You couple that with the fact that you have yourself a team that is potentially going to finish under 500. I would say a good season for the Patriots is doubling their win total and ending the year at 8-9, winning some of the games they lost last year that they probably should have won kind of deal. You're sitting somewhere around maybe pick number like 10, 11, 12, 13 in the upper half of the first round, or just in the rounds in general. You have attractive picks. You give a first-round pick, let's say this upcoming draft and the following draft, plus another later selection or two, because at the end of the day, if the Cowboys want to move Micah Parsons, you do have to deal with the fact that he's probably going to wind up being the highest non-paid quarterback in the NFL post-trade. You've got yourself quite the opportunity to make a splash of a move. Now, the reality is Robert Kraft as an owner, fairly cheap, not one known to make those massive type of deals and those massive type of moves with his team. But when you look at prime candidates and just a team that desperately could use that help, because you're looking at an offense that is so young, so inexperienced, and you're relying on a lot of that youth and inexperience to help you in this second year of Drake May's career. Obviously, like I said, Stephon Diggs is a big veteran that you brought in, but your left tackle is going to be highlighted by a rookie in Will Campbell. You have Kyle Williams and Travion Henderson, both rookies who are expected to make impactful roles, carve out impactful roles, within this offense. What better way to help out your young and up-and-coming quarterback who's working with a relatively young offense as a whole than to give him a stout defense to work behind? And you'll notice that's a recurring theme as we kind of go through the discussions here. But that's my pitch for the New England Patriots. The other team that I think makes a lot of sense here, another team with a really young quarterback. We're going to flip on down south, though. We're going to head over to Tennessee in the AFC South and look at the Titans here, because this is another prime candidate in my eyes. Now, the cap space, not quite as nice as New England, sitting on about $35 million right now to work with here. But with the way that you can structure things and add maybe a void year or two on the back end of Micah Parsons' extension to help open up some money, it doesn't really worry me too much. I think $35 million in cap space is still plenty to work with here. The Brian Callahan era, though, feels like it's really officially underway for me this season. Obviously, last year being his first year as their head coach, but you now have rookie quarterback Cam Ward in the building, and he is going to be the guy that leads Brian Callahan's offense for the foreseeable future here. And with a team like Tennessee that has, I would say, very small expectations, I think you're looking at a team that wants to win roughly like same ballpark as the Patriots to feel good about things. You're looking at like 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 wins if things go really, really well in a rookie quarterback's first season with an offense that isn't necessarily bad, but not perfect either. Somewhere in the middle, give or take, depending on just how many turnovers we wind up seeing from this Tennessee team. But a team that has probably a better defense than they do offense with a rookie quarterback as it currently stands right now. And I am one of those people that is a firm believer in the best way, aside from adding offensive weapons, to help out your rookie quarterback is to build a fortified and stout defense. Now, you look at Tennessee and how they fared last year defensively, tied for third fewest in sacks, and then, of course, second lowest pressure rate in the NFL. Obviously, the pass rush being boosted would only help out that unit there. And you look at Micah Parsons, a guy who's never had less than 12 sacks in a season. Why not add a guy like that to that locker room there? But on the flip side of things, there are some positives. I don't want to sit here and act like the Tennessee Titans defense was a slouch by any means, because they were still fairly good in certain instances, especially when it came to going up against the pass. Second fewest in passing yards allowed last season. Now, whether you want to acknowledge the asterisk that you could throw on there of they faced the fewest pass attempts in the NFL and they faced the 7th most rushing attempts because teams were able to run the football pretty effectively on there, that's a fair conversation to have, but that's not the conversation I'm really looking to have right now. The fact is that the Tennessee Titans defense did show some flashes and did deal with some injuries throughout last season that if guys stay healthy this year, in combination with the additions that they've made, plus adding a guy like Micah Parsons, I think that this is the possibility of taking a defense that's like somewhere in the realm of average, and you could be pushing it towards like top 12 in the league just based off roster construction and some of those positives you saw from last season despite what they were dealing with. Micah Parsons presents an immediate upgrade. Automatically, you're looking at a better pass rush, but also a bolster to that run defense as well. You look at what he is able to do coming off the edge, probably one of the best guys when it comes to sealing the edge against the run. So it's an immediate boost there. And the combination of Jeffrey Simmons and Micah Parsons terrorizing quarterbacks, battling it out against offensive lines, like that is one of the more devastating 1-2 punches. Jeffrey Simmons is so good on the middle of that defense and on the interior of that defensive line, and is someone that it feels like maybe gets forgotten about because of just where Tennessee has been the last few seasons. But Titans fans, I know about Jeffrey Simmons. I know how good Jeffrey Simmons is, and I know how good a Jeffrey Simmons and Micah Parsons-led defense in Tennessee could potentially be with those two guys running things on that side of the football here. So you improve that defensive front. You help out a pass defense that was, again, pretty good, despite the fact that you could point out that they faced the fewest pass attempts, but still a pretty good defense when facing those pass attempts that they did face. I really like the idea of Tennessee. And part of the reason why I highlighted them and the New England Patriots first is because for me, it makes the most sense to see an AFC team wind up with Micah Parsons, because if, again, we're just talking ifs here, this is all speculation. If the Cowboys are to trade Micah Parsons, you probably don't want to trade him into the NFC. That's just kind of where my head is at with that. Now, I highlight that at this point because that'll bring me to my third team, an NFC team. This is where we start getting real speculative and we start really getting outside of the realm of possibility, but fits in my eyes is kind of what we're looking at here. The Detroit Lions, a team that could absolutely use the addition of Micah Parsons and get yourself that true running mate to work alongside Aiden Hutchinson, who's coming back from a devastating injury last season. What better way than to take some of that pressure off of a returning Aiden Hutchinson than pairing him up with Micah Parsons? You look at the way Detroit finished last season. Defense has been, and this is even going beyond just last season, defense has been a bit of an Achilles heel for this team. And if you can get the defense to where it needs to be and playing at the level it needs to play at to be more of a championship caliber type of unit, Detroit in the next season or two could very well find themselves competing in a Super Bowl. Now, the reality is, and again, this goes back to a little bit less realistic expectations when talking about Detroit. Yes, Detroit has one of the widest margins in terms of cap space to work with. I believe their number's sitting at around $51 million. So yes, you have all the money in the world, but this is a team that's drafted extremely well over the last few seasons during this Dan Campbell era, and some bills are going to be due. They're going to have to pay some of those key contributors, especially on the offensive side of the football, that have been extremely helpful in allowing that offense to be as explosive as it has been. And with that comes the choice. Do you let some of those key cogs go for the sake of maybe adding a little more balance to your team? You strip away a piece or two from the offense to allow that defense to maybe flourish a little bit further and reach the level that you'd like that defense to be playing at to back up what has been an extremely impressive offense. And the reality is, I'm kind of in a position right now, and Lions fans, you can tell me if you feel the same here, where I'm trusting the drafting that Detroit has been able to put together over the last few years, basically since Dan Campbell and this regime has taken over. I'm more willing to trust their ability to draft on offense and allow maybe a guy or two to go to, and then ultimately replace them with another key cog in that wheel, and then go out into the market and add a guy like a Micah Parsons to help fill the voids on the defense that you've been dealing with the last few years. I just sit here and I look at the pairing of Aiden Hutchinson and Micah Parsons as just, you are talking two game wreckers. The tear that Aiden Hutchinson was on last season, you could tell And Aiden Hutchinson's been good already through his career, don't get me wrong, but you can tell it finally clicked for him last season. And this goes back to the conversation of it typically takes guys coming off the edge, like those elite guys, maybe like 2-3 years to really figure out what they are and how to play in this league. It clicked for Aiden Hutchinson last season. I could only imagine the production that both of these guys could see when O-lines and offensive coordinators are trying to scheme up protections and deal with having to defend against both of those two guys. This is one of those things where you're taking Micah Parsons, who, as I mentioned earlier, has no less than 12 sacks in a season, coupled with a guy in Aiden Hutchinson who has damn near 30 sacks himself in what is essentially 2 and like a quarter of a season, because he went down in game, 5 of last year, and has nearly 30 sacks himself. You put those two guys off on the edge, and as I mentioned with the Tennessee Titans too earlier, you're not only improving your pass rush, you're improving your ability to stop the run because Micah Parsons can seal that edge with the best of them, but you're helping out that secondary as well. And on top of that, you're putting yourself in a position to have an elite blue chip guy on that roster, a leader, somebody who is there to win and compete. And that's just one of those things that I would love to see this Detroit Lions defense ultimately have. Again, the biggest question mark would then be, who are you willing to part ways with offensively, knowing that you're going to have to bring in Micah Parsons and pay him, and it's probably going to cost you one of those key guys on offense. You have to sit there and decide who that person is going to wind up being. But I keep going back to, I trust the way that this front office has been drafting players and the way these coaches have been developing them offensively, that I would be okay seeing Detroit let somebody go. I'm not going to speculate who that guy is, but I'd be willing to I'd be willing to see them let somebody go for the sake of adding a guy like Micah Parsons to really help around this football team out. And then the last team that I have on this list here, and this is the one that really was like, this is very far out of the realm of possibility, but I love the idea of it, and the more I sit on it, the more it just makes so much sense to me. And that's going to be the Denver Broncos, a team that does not need Micah Parsons, but with Micah Parsons, the unquestioned best defense in the NFL in my eyes. And Denver's already well in that conversation for best defense in the NFL as it currently stands. But you put Micah Parsons on that roster, and I don't really think it's much of a conversation anymore. Again, I'll openly recognize that this is so far out of the realm of possibility, but here's the reason for why I would love to see this and why I think it actually does make a ton of sense. You're working with a second-year quarterback in Bo Nix, very similar situation that I laid out with the New England Patriots here, showed a ton of promise in his rookie season, showed arguably the most promise out of just about everybody in that draft class, not named Jaden Daniels. He'll be on a rookie contract through 2027. Fifth-year option covers the 2028 season, so you have plenty of time to work with. The cap space will only continue to balloon, and you do have over $30 million in cap space to currently work with. This is squarely all about maximizing Bo Nix now and for the next 2 or 3 seasons while you have him on that cost-controlled contract. The scenario that I'm laying out, though, does come with a big caveat, and this is where the conversation is to be had. Would you allow this to happen for the sake of bringing in a Micah Parsons? And that's going to be, unfortunately, trading away Jonathan Cooper to the Dallas Cowboys in this trade scenario we're talking here. Now, Jonathan Cooper did sign a 4-year extension back in November of last year, so that does kind of throw a bit of a wrench in the situation here. $23 million in dead cap is a tough number to work yourself around. However, with the way the cap has been ballooning, as we've already talked about, there are ways around this. Maybe a void year or two at the end to try to spread out some of that cap money or cap space as well and alleviate that first year or two you're dealing with the dead cap money that comes with trading away a Jonathan Cooper. But I see it as Denver being a playoff team last year, probably going to be within that same ballpark again. Your first round draft picks aren't as attractive to a team like the Dallas Cowboys when you're considering a team like the Titans, a team like the Patriots, who could potentially have top 10 selections in the draft next year themselves. So this is where a Jonathan Cooper comes into play here, because you're trading away Jonathan Cooper to go, all right, you give us Micah Parsons, you're losing an elite pass rusher. Jonathan Cooper hasn't been no slouch himself, earned every single penny of that extension that he got from the Denver Broncos just last season, to help kind of mitigate the loss of such a player. Dallas gets somebody who can still be productive on that defense for them. Yes, you eat a big cap hit, but you can absolutely work your way around it, especially, as we mentioned, with the cap numbers continuing to balloon every year as TV contracts only get bigger and bigger for the NFL. Both sides get a pass rusher. I would argue, though, that Micah Parsons takes that defense even further into the elite conversation that Denver's already working with, and now you have yourself a literal Super Bowl caliber defense, from the defensive front to the linebacking room to the secondary that you are boasting in Denver. And then you, of course, have yourself an offense led by Bo Nix that hopefully gets only better going into year number 2 with some of the draft selections and free agency changes that we've seen from this team this offseason. And Denver makes a full-fledged... You bring Micah Parsons in, is how I'm going to put this. You are making a clear message to the rest of the NFL. We're running for the Super Bowl. You don't trade for Micah Parsons. You're basically just telling everyone, we're pushing forward. We're expecting progression this year. Hopefully we make it back to the playoffs. A trade for Micah Parsons in this scenario here, you are telling the league, we're going for it. You're telling your fan base, we are going for it. Yes, you lose a guy like Jonathan Cooper in the process, but Broncos fans, you tell me, would you take Micah Parsons or Jonathan Cooper any day of the week? As it currently stands in my eyes, I'd probably take a guy like Micah Parsons. No, disrespect to Jonathan Cooper. Love his game. Love what he's able to do. And I chose Jonathan Cooper rather than a guy like Nick Bonito, largely in part because I really like Nick Bonito's game, and he has just blown me away the last couple of seasons, especially with the production he had last season, a guy who I don't think gets nearly the love he deserves just because Denver is still clawing their way back into like real media coverage relevancy. And now teams, I feel like fan bases and teams are going to really start to know the name Nick Bonito. So I like the rise that he's on, and I like just how much of a playmaker he can be for this defense, that I'd like to pair him alongside Micah Parsons as opposed to it being Micah and Jonathan Cooper. So that's where I stand on that, if you were wondering why I chose one over the other. But those are 4 teams that I really like the idea of seeing going after a Micah Parsons. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions. Who would you like to see the Dallas Cowboys trade Micah Parsons to? Who makes the most sense in your eyes? Again, of course, with a capital if that ends up being the case. Whether or not it happens remains to be seen. I'm erring on the side of probably not going to happen, but you never know. We've seen crazier things in the NFL. But as always, you made it to the end. Greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.